Okay, before we start this tier list, I just need to say, because everybody will throw a fit, this is obviously subjective, and just because I put something in D tier doesn't mean you can't bring it on like levels 7+, difficulty 7+, and still be okay. I've seen that happen so many times. In this game, it's really not so much what you bring, it's more how you use what you bring. So almost everything in this game is viable. There's some things which obviously really suck, I think, but you know, you can kind of bring whatever as long as you're good enough and you know how to use it. Now, that being said, there are definitely things that are better than other things. So that's why we're making this list. Okay, first we have the machine gun, and the machine gun is a solid pick against most mobs. Anything but the biggest mobs, really. It has medium armor pen, which is great. The solo reload speed isn't too bad. It's pretty manageable. Just don't reload in the middle of a group of enemies. And then you can hold down the reload button to change the fire rate, which is amazing. It's a pretty solid pick. I'm gonna have to put it in B tier. It's not the best thing ever, but it's definitely the best thing you can bring in the early game. Okay, next, the anti-material rifle against the bugs, I would put in C tier. Against the automatons, I would put in A tier. So naturally, I'm gonna put it in B tier. The reason is, if you're headshotting the automatons, you can one-shot almost all of the automatons. The Hulks, if you aim for that red laser where their head's at, you can two-shot them. So it's amazing at taking those out. Super fast. Against the bugs, it underperforms quite a bit, but yeah, you can customize the zoom on it. You can take out automatons from super long range. So it's a pretty solid pick. It's definitely slept on in this game. Okay, next is the stalwart. I'm personally not a fan of it. I've brought it a couple times. Admittedly, I haven't used it a whole ton. You can reload it on the move, and I think you get more ammo than the machine gun actually, but with no armor pen, I don't think the cons of the machine gun are that bad. I would personally bring the machine gun every time over this. But again, that's me. I know some people like the stalwart more. Okay, next is the expendable anti-tank. So with this, it can one-shot dropships. It's really good at taking the armor off chargers, and it does decent damage against like Bile Titans, all those things. The thing that's nice about this is its cooldown is only like 70 seconds, I think. So you're never in a situation really where you're thinking you need it really bad and you never have it available. And then every time you call it down, you're getting 2 launchers for it. So even the call down itself can be used as a weapon. Honestly, a great pick. I would probably put it in A tier, especially on the lower levels. It's really shining. Okay, next we have the recoilless rifle. And for this one, if you have a teammate reloading for you, the DPS you can output is actually pretty insane. The reload's really fast in that case, but if you're solo, the reload is like really long. It's like the longest in the game, I think, out of every weapon. On the higher difficulties, you're going to be stopping quite a bit. And at that point, you're just going to get mauled, like absolutely destroyed. So as you get to the higher difficulties, it kind of drops off just because of the reload time. And the damage is decent on it. It's just the reload time that really kills this. I would put it in B tier. If we're going left to right, I don't know if I'm going to go left to right. I guess we'll go left to right. I'd probably put it above the machine gun because the machine gun's kind of the same case, and the super high difficulties, you're not going to really be bringing it that much. Okay, next we have the flamethrower. This thing, in my opinion, needs a buff. It's going to go D tier. It's good at killing the small bugs, but the bigger threats, it's just going to catch them on fire, and that's going to catch you or your teammates on fire. So unless you want a lot of friendly fire, literally, definitely D tier, and it needs a buff. Okay, next is the autocannon. This thing is extremely strong. It has really long range. It's really accurate, even at the long range. It does really good damage, even against armor. The solo reload isn't bad at all. It's actually pretty quick. This is one of those backpack weapons where I say just grab the backpack yourself. You don't really need a teammate to do it. It's fast enough, and the magazine size is pretty decent. So this thing is definitely strong. No one's gonna be mad at you for bringing one of these. I'd put it up here, top of A tier probably. I've seen a lot of people put it in S tier. It could almost go up into S tier for me. I would just put it in A tier just because I think S tier is the very best of the best of the best. All right, next is the railgun. I'll be honest, guys, this thing kind of sucks. I put it in C tier. I'm kidding, S tier, obviously. This thing's insane. 1 or 2 shot every single enemy in the game, pretty much. The Bile Titans, when they're opening their mouth to do the projectile vomit thing, you shoot them in like the lower jaw or their mouth. You can 1 or 2 shot them. Chargers, 2 shot them in the front leg. That'll take their armor off, and then you just blast them with your primary weapon, and then they're done. Hulks, you can 1 or 2 shot in the red laser. Yeah, that thing's ridiculous. It doesn't even require a backpack slot. S tier easily. It's extremely viable on every single mission. Always going to be amazing. Okay, next is the spear, and I'll be honest, I'm extremely disappointed with this. Looking at this before I unlocked it, I was super hyped. I thought it was going to be the coolest thing ever. It's like the javelin missile, but that has so many issues. Like, it'll 1 or 2 shot almost anything if you can actually hit it. The problem with this is you get 4 shots total. It requires a backpack slot. The reload's pretty slow. You have to spend the time to lock on to what you want to hit, and then half the time it doesn't even hit where it's locked onto. So for that reason, I'm gonna put it, I don't know, C or D. Like, it might just be bugged at this point. I think it might just be bugged. I'll put it in C because you can kill stuff with it sometimes. Like, it's decent. I'll just say this, it's really good when it works. When it doesn't work, it sucks. Okay, next is the Orbital Gatling Barrage. So for me, the problem with this is the AoE is too small and it doesn't penetrate heavy armor. So if it either had a bigger AoE or if it went through heavy armor, I would rate it higher, but I'm going to put it in C tier just because it kind of overkills everything in a small area. And it does pen medium armor, which is good, but yeah, it just kind of overkills anything in a really small area. Orbital Airburst kind of has the same problem. It's a small area. This one only works against light targets, I think, though, and it overkills the light targets. It doesn't work on like objectives or anything either. So I'll probably put it in C tier as well. It's not terrible, but it's just kind of mid. All right, next is the 120mm barrage, and everybody knows this thing's definitely terrible. There's just too much wrong with it. Basically, the AoE of each hit is small. It does low damage. There's not enough shots in the actual barrage itself. Probably the biggest problem is the shots are spaced way too far apart. That's the biggest problem with both of these orbitals, actually. This is a D tier. It definitely needs a buff, at least 1 or 2 buffs in different areas. Same thing with the 380mm barrage. The shots are spaced too far apart. The damage is good, and I think actually the amount of shots per barrage is fine since the shots are so big, but they're just spaced too far apart. And for that reason, it's not that good. You're never really going to hit what you're intending to hit, and it's really easy to friendly fire with this. I'll put it down. It could almost go in the C tier, honestly, but I think it's still going to go in the D tier. Okay, the orbital walking barrage, I actually think is better than both of those barrages because you can at least somewhat predict where it's going to go, and it's decent for softening up bases, but it does have a long cooldown. I'm going to put that in the C tier. It's at least somewhat predictable, and you can get the job done. Okay, next is the orbital laser. This thing is extremely strong. It has a long uptime. It auto tracks targets. It prioritizes the biggest targets for you. It can kill like 2 or 3 chargers in one go. The only downsides it really has are you can only use it 3 times per mission, and it has a long cooldown, but you get a lot out of it every time you use it. I'm gonna put it in S tier because if you're gonna use one stratagem and you want the most value out of that stratagem, that's gonna be your best bet for like an orbital or a airstrike, I should say. Okay, next is the orbital rail cannon. This thing is extremely strong as well. It has a long cooldown, but you get unlimited uses, and the cooldown's actually shorter than the orbital laser. It'll one-shot everything except for the Bile Titan. It'll do most of the damage to kill it, but it won't completely one-shot like a brand new one, and it'll even be able to take out objectives if you throw it right on an objective. So, and I think it also prioritizes the largest creature nearby, so it's a really solid pick. I'm gonna put it in A tier. Okay, next we have the Eagle Strafing Run. This thing is pretty mid. It doesn't have any armor penetration at all, unfortunately, so it's only gonna kill like the smallest stuff, and I really don't see any reason to use it over the Eagle Cluster Bomb because that just does the same thing but better and in a bigger area. So I'm gonna put it in C tier. I think that's a good place for it. Okay, next is the Eagle Airstrike. This thing I think is slept on like crazy. I think it's super good. This is probably the most divisive one. I've seen it, people put it in S tier. I've seen people put it like C and D tier for some reason. I think it's S tier. You can use it so many times and the cooldown's short. It's really good at clearing out bug holes, objectives, even heavy enemies it'll kill. So it's really solid and you can use it so much. That's what's really bringing it up to S tier, is the amount of times you can use it and how much value you get every time you use it. Next is the cluster bombs. These are also really good. This will clear everything out except like the heaviest things, and it's a huge AoE. This would go in A tier for me. Probably put it like right in here. Yeah, you throw that into a camp, pretty much everything like medium size and below is dead. You get quite a few charges of it throughout the match. You can use it a lot. Probably the only downside is it's not the best thing for objectives. It doesn't really do anything, but yeah, other than that, it's solid, clearing out hordes. Next is the Eagle Napalm Strike. This thing's good against like medium-sized mobs and below. It's a good area denial streak, and you can use it a lot, just like the other Eagle Strikes. But some of the bigger mobs, it's not gonna, like the Hulks and the Chargers and stuff, it's not gonna outright kill them. It's just gonna set them on fire. So it's decent. I'm gonna put it in the B tier. I think it's in a good spot. I don't really think it needs to be buffed or anything. That's probably what I would keep it at, is the B tier right there. Okay, next is the Jetpack. This one is going to be very controversial. I think no matter where I put it, it'll be controversial. This one's so divisive. I've seen people put it all the way from S. Some people put it down in like C tier. I don't really ever see it down in like D tier. So you can get into some crazy spots with this where you can't be hit by anything except for like Bile Titans. But the thing is, you're using a backpack slot to do that, and you can't always do that like on the fly whenever you want. Depends on the map really and where you're at. For me, I would put it either low end A tier or high end B tier. It's a really hard one to do. I'm probably going to put it in the B tier. If you're good enough, you don't need it, and you can get better use out of your backpack slot from something else. So high end B, you could easily put it in A tier though. It really just depends on the player, like I said before. Okay, next is the Eagle Smoke, and I'm actually going to pair this with the Orbital Smoke. These are going to go together. So these fill a very certain role, and they do that role really well. They're really good at helping you break contact from the enemy and get out of there, especially on the higher difficulties. The problem is, if you're playing with a group, if you're not coordinated, it doesn't always help all of your group. They do a good job on that role, and it's really hard to rate them anywhere just because they're not blowing stuff up like kind of everything else does. So that's why I'm going to put them in the viable on the right mission. And those are probably going to be the only things I even really put there. And then viable on the right mission, the escort missions, these things carry super hard. They're super good at that mission. So that's kind of why I put them there. They're not bad at all, and I'm not going to say they're bad because they're really not. I'm not going to say they're amazing either. They're kind of just, it really depends. So yeah, their own little tier there. Next is the rocket pods. I want to love these things. There's something wrong with the targeting, I think. They don't always hit where they're supposed to. The damage is good. The only problem is they don't always hit every single time, but they can be used on objectives too. I'm going to put them low end B because they could probably go even drop down to the C tier. It really depends. Sometimes they work really good. Sometimes they don't work as well, but I'll put them in B tier. They're pretty solid. They just need a buff to their targeting, I think, and then they'd be in a really good spot. Okay, next we have the 500 kg bomb, and this is probably my favorite in the game. So it hurts. I want to put it in the S tier, but thinking about it more, it has to go, I think, in the high end A tier. I don't know. Maybe it could go in the S tier. So it's really good at taking out objectives. You can get even 2 of them with upgrades, which is really good. And then the Eagle Rearm is always pretty short cooldown. The only downside, I'd say, is the AoE for this isn't as big as it looks. It's kind of deceptive. It can one-shot a Bile Titan if you hit him directly. It's just kind of hard to do. So man, I want to put it in S so bad. I'll put it in high-end A for now. Personally, it's probably my favorite thing in the game. I love it. It's so satisfying to set off, but I'll put it in A tier. Okay, next is the Orbital Precision Strike, and this thing is really solid, especially since you get it as like your first thing in the game. Has a really low cooldown. You get unlimited uses out of it. The AoE is a little small on it, which is probably only downside. You can one-hit a charger with this if you can actually hit it, which is a little hard to do. It's really good against objectives. I'm going to put it in B tier, and I'm going to slap it like right in here, probably high-end B tier. It's really good. This one is so slept on, it's not even funny. It's not amazing, but it's not trash like everyone says it is. So I always see people putting this at like the bottom of their tier lists. Honestly, this thing is really good at killing small enemies. If you throw it in a bug hole when they breach up out of the ground, it's going to kill like everything that comes out of that, except for like the biggest stuff. And it has a really low cooldown, and it kind of fulfills the same role as the Napalm Strike. I'd say it's probably just a little bit worse than that, and I would probably put it in the high end of C tier because I definitely think it's slept on. Use it for bug breaches, and it's really good at killing everything that comes out of bug breaches, basically. Also, it works pretty decently on automatons as well. All right, next we have the Orbital EMS Strike, and this is probably the one where I really just don't know where to put it. It's so hard to put it anywhere. It kind of has the same role as the smokes in a way, where it helps you break contact because it's going to slow enemies. It's not going to really kill anything. It's not really for a specific mission like those two. So I'm just going to throw it in C tier because it's pretty decent. It's just not terrible. It's not great in my opinion. So that's where I'm going to put it. Actually, one thing I forgot to mention about it is it's really good for setting up your other airstrikes because it's going to basically stop everything in their tracks. So it's good for setting up. It does slow you down as well if you call it in on yourself. So I'm going to put it in C tier. Seems like a good spot to put it. Okay, next we have the HMG emplacement. Really, for me, the lack of armor penetration on this thing is what just really hits it hard. It just needs a buff really badly. I'm gonna put it in D tier because you're sitting still. It's good at killing like the smaller things and things that don't have a lot of armor, but anything with armor is just not gonna cut it. And you're gonna be sitting still while they're gonna keep pushing you. So for now, I'm gonna put it in D tier. I would love to see that get like increased armor pen, and then it would be probably up into like B tier. Really depends what they do with it. Hopefully they buff it though. That's gonna bring us to the shield generator. So this thing is, in my opinion, pretty useless against the bugs. It has some uses against the automatons. It'll give you a little breathing room to reload, and you can shoot out of it and they can't shoot in. So it's good against the automatons, I'd say, but it's not like the best thing ever. I'll put it in C tier for now. I think it's like a okay stratagem to use against the automatons, but against the bugs, you're not going to get any use out of it really. So okay, next is the Tesla. The Tesla, I hate it. It friendly fires way too much in my opinion, and it's close range, so it kind of just gets wrecked by chargers anyways. I don't know. I know people are going to hate that I put it there, but I don't like it at all. I think it sucks. I'm going to put it in the high end D tier and leave it there. Next is the landmines. Both of the landmines I'm going to put together. They're kind of about the same for me. There's not really, I think maybe the incendiaries are like slightly better. I put them at the low end of C tier. People hate them because of the friendly fire aspect of it, but it's really good at holding a position from anything except the biggest bugs. So when you're calling down the extract, it's good. And if you're doing a defense mission, it's good as long as your teammates know it's there. It's good for defense. I'll leave it there. Okay, next is the supply pack. This one is amazing. This is paired extremely well with the grenade launcher, and a lot of people for some reason don't know you can resupply yourself as well. You press 5 on the keyboard, or you press down on the D-pad, and compared to the grenade launcher, which doesn't need a backpack, this works really well because you can just fill it up. So this will go into A tier. Let's slap it in, I don't know, here. It's always going to be good. And then that brings us to the grenade launcher. This is another A tier option. I'll slide it in here above that. Super good against bug holes and nests, even like big creatures. It's good. It's a solid all-arounder. And like I said, combined with the backpack is just a perfect combination. And that brings us to the laser cannon next. And this thing is terrible. It's going to go in the D tier. It is better against the automatons than it is against the bugs in my opinion, but even then there's just so many better options. It definitely needs a damage buff. It's definitely lacking. Okay, next is the Guard Dog Rover. I love this thing. When I'm not bringing the shield generator backpack, this is what I'm bringing usually. It's really good at keeping the small stuff off your back, and its downtime isn't long at all. It'll be up most of the time. And it's solid. It does some decent damage. It's a better version of the regular rover. I'm gonna put it in A tier, especially against those hunters. I think that's what they're called. The little, the winged bugs that jump on you and jump side to side. It's really good at keeping those off of you. So it's a solid pick. The only downsides, I guess, would be it doesn't really kill the big stuff, and it takes a backpack slot, and sometimes it'll friendly fire. It's not very often. And that will bring us to the ballistic shield, which is absolute dookie. This is like the worst stratagem in the game, in my opinion. You're not really getting anything out of it, and you have to use your secondary. I don't know. I think it sucks. It's only going to cover you from one side, and yeah, I don't know. I think it sucks. So D tier, not really any point in using it. Okay, next is the arc thrower. This one, I don't know. It only hits 3 enemies when you charge it up. It feels like it's good enough to, I mean, it does kill chargers. It can kill chargers. I just feel like the damage is really low and it only hits 3 enemies, and then it doesn't even always hit the enemy you're actually trying to hit. So I don't know, maybe I just had bad experiences with it. I've only used it maybe like 3 times, and then I just kind of gave up on it. Actually, I think I only used it twice. So let me know in the comments what you guys think about this thing. I'm going to slap it in C tier. I know some people rate it really high, and then some people say it sucks. So I'll throw it like right in the middle, smack dab in the middle of C. All right, the shield generator backpack. This is the best backpack and the best stratagem in the game, hands down. And this is the one stratagem in the game where if they nerfed it, I would be like, okay, that makes sense. Everything else, be like, I don't know if they should have nerfed it. I don't really think anything else really needs to be nerfed. I think actually a lot of things just need to be buffed, and then the game would feel better, like especially in the D tier. I think the C tier, like they need little tweaks to be better. D tier just needs straight up buffs. But this thing, if they nerfed it, I wouldn't disagree with the nerf, I should say. So I'm gonna add another tier above S. It's too strong, I think. And it looks like we got a bunch of sentries left, and then some of the default stuff, plus this rover. For some reason he's all the way over here, so I'm gonna throw him in really quick. The default rover, is that even what it's called? Okay, it's called the guard dog, my bad. So the guard dog is a worse version of its laser counterpart. I'm gonna throw it in C tier. I think it's just super mid. There's no reason to use this over the laser one. All right, now we got a bunch of sentry guns. So first is the machine gun sentry. It's pretty mid. I'm gonna put it in high end of C tier because it gets the job done. It's just that the Gatling Sentry does everything it does but better. And so the Gatling, I put that in B tier. I think, yeah, I might put it in B tier. I could almost see that going into A though. No, I'll keep it in B tier. I think B tier is a good spot. This thing's downsides are it doesn't have a lot of ammo, but it does have like medium armor pen, I think. And probably the biggest downside for this is that it team kills a lot because it'll just keep spraying as it's turning, and then it'll just hit your teammates. But it does have a low cooldown, and it's pretty good at what it's supposed to do. So I'll put it in B tier. Okay, next we have the mortar sentry. So this one, I'm gonna put in A tier. I think it's really good. It's extremely good at killing everything. The problem is if your teammates don't know what's up for some reason, you got to communicate when it's up. Otherwise it's gonna team kill like crazy. But if your team knows it's up and they know how to play when the mortar's up, it's super, super good. So it's the best sentry at killing things in my opinion, closely followed by the auto cannon. But the EMS mortar pairs extremely well with the regular mortar. So I almost want to put it right next to it, but I guess on its own, the mortar definitely is better. So I'll put this like high end of B tier right here. But just know that like if you're running these two together, they work really well together. And the EMS mortar is basically better to run over the EMS orbital because it does the same thing, but it does it better. And it shoots a lot more of them. So you're always going to be better off running the EMS mortar over the orbital EMS. Okay, now we have the autocannon sentry. This thing is really solid. It kills everything really well. Can friendly fire, but it's not as common as some of the other sentries. So I'm gonna put it in A tier. It's really solid. It can kill everything, the biggest things. Ammo's decent on it, especially with the upgrades. So that's where it's gonna go. The rocket sentry is basically a worse version of the autocannon. It definitely needs a damage buff, especially against armor, but it's not bad. It's just that if you're gonna run this or the autocannon, you should always choose the autocannon. I don't know, maybe low end of B tier. I don't think it does as good as it's supposed to do at that role it's trying to do. Okay, now we have the default ones. SOS, obviously it's viable on the right mission if you don't have a full party. You can prioritize yourself in the quick play queue to get more people in there. So there you go, viable on the right mission. Ammo, you're gonna be using this every single time. There's no reason to not put it in S tier. I mean, you need it. You have to use it all the time. And then same thing with reinforce. Although, I guess reinforce could depend on your teammates. If they suck, you know, it could be D tier. If you're playing with me, maybe it's S tier. I don't know. Just kidding. seriously though, it's S tier. You have to use it to revive your teammates. So that's where I'd put it. Let's see if there's anything I want to change here. I think it's a pretty solid list. So let me know down in the comments if you agree or disagree with this list. I know I talked about the bugs a lot more than the automatons. I do play against the bugs a lot more, but I do play the automatons a decent amount as well. So maybe I should have talked about the automatons a little bit more in this video, but I did take into account the automatons. I just didn't talk about them as much as I should have. So pretty happy with that list. Hit the thumbs up if you liked the video. If you disliked it, I mean, dislike it, I guess. I don't know. Anyways, thanks for watching. Catch you guys in the next one.